So I took the plunge and bought the Nikon 85 1.2 Z mount lens. Right out of the gate, let me just say that every photo you see in this review is a photo made from this 85 1.2 paired with my Nikon ZF body, which is by far my favorite Nikon body, if not one of my all-time favorite camera bodies ever. And of course, you can find my review about the Nikon ZF here on my YouTube, or the video and article on my Patreon. And I just want to take a quick moment to thank all my patrons. They are the ones that enable me to be able to do these kinds of videos. And yeah, I cannot thank you all enough for your support. So make sure and check out my Patreon if you want to see more reviews, and especially the video article kinds of combinations that I do. Okay, back to the Nikon 85 1.2. So right out of the gate, it's worth mentioning, I am not primarily an 85mm photographer. It is just not in my wheelhouse for anything really portrait related, or anything that I tend to share as sneak peeks or in blog posts that you might see most often in my social media or something like that. I really prefer shooting 50mm, and one of my all-time favorite lenses is the Canon 50 1.2. But I did buy and shoot for a while with the Nikon 50 1.2. The Z mount lens is wonderful, but that lens is surprisingly humongous and heavy for the specs. I mean, it does perform beautifully, but it is a large lens. This is also a large lens, but I would say that it's actually pleasantly light and really nicely balanced when put on the camera body, whereas the 50 1.2 is not. It looks heavy and is heavy. This looks heavy and is lighter than you might expect, which I really love, and who wouldn't love that? The hardware itself is pretty straightforward. You have a function button that you can customize, and then a manual or autofocus switch. Aside from that, just another custom ring and manual focus. And I think that's pretty much it as far as the hardware goes. So I appreciate that minimalistic kind of approach. I don't need a digital readout of my exact settings or anything that's at all going to increase the size and weight of the lens. I just want the glass to do a really good job. And I specifically love glass that doesn't require any distortion correction in post. Now, most lenses are going to have some degree of distortion, especially wider lenses, but expect that something in the 85mm range would not require distortion correction for it to look anything close to a finished product. And this lens does not. It's totally great. And I have to say, though, I sold my Canon 85 1.2 because, again, it's just not worth the money for me to have an 85mm lens that I'm not going to be using all that much. It does seem that this lens performs right on par with Canon's offering and seems to be a little bit lighter and a little bit smaller. I need to double check and take an exact measurement too. And yeah, looking at the stats here, the weight of the Nikon is about 1,160 grams, and the weight of the Canon's is 1,190 grams. So Canon's is a heavier lens. So my memory does serve me well, and this is a lighter lens overall. And I'm also gonna guess that it's a smaller physical footprint. So win for Nikon in that category. Now I bought this lens because I came across a photographer whose work really stood out to me. The field of view, meaning the perspective of the lens they were using relative to the amount of depth of field, meaning the bokeh that I was seeing, was kind of blowing my mind. It really, really looked like this photographer was shooting with almost like a medium format or a large format sensor, kind of like what you would see from a film camera, because larger format sensors are a bit expensive and rare even today in the digital world. And this person said that no, they are shooting with an 85 1.2 and their Nikon Z8. And the rest of the look, meaning the bokeh, I guess, and then of course the quality of light, it was all due to their technique. So I was really excited to buy this lens and see for myself if I could recreate some of this, what I personally would have deemed impossible perspective to have with just one click and no editing in post. I thought for sure maybe they were using a stitched panorama, sort of like a Brennheiser method, but no, they insisted one single shot simply through good technique and the 85 1.2. So here's some examples of images that I made with this lens. Some of these are edited, some are not. This is just a little family session that I did for AARP. Nothing crazy there. And the more I shot with this lens, the more I started to realize that I'm pretty sure the original photographer whose work I came across is not being entirely forthcoming about what they're doing in post-processing to create the bokeh that they say they're getting. Almost all of these shots are completely wide open at f1.2, and I'm not seeing anything, with the field of view relative to the depth of field that indicates that surprises me in any way. Now, that's not to say this isn't a great lens. Like, the bokeh is really, really buttery smooth, which is a totally subjective opinion, but that's the only way I can describe it. There's nothing in the bokeh, quality or artifacts that are really distracting to me, which I really love and appreciate. Here's one with a lot of, kind of string light type LEDs in the background, where you can kind of see how the bokeh is represented. And it looks like a really nice photo. There's no added bokeh in post, and it looks like pretty much what I would expect. So I hate to say it, but I have to conclude that this photographer is doing something in post-processing, maybe not on every image, but on a large number of photos that they are sharing. Ooh, the sunlight is like coming right through. But on a large number of photos that they're sharing, there's definitely got to be some post-processing happening, because I'm just not seeing this otherworldly depth. And who knows what that is? Again, that's not to say this lens doesn't perform beautifully. And in terms of things like sharpness or some of the white sheet specs that people seem to care about more than I've ever understood or personally cared about, it does seem very sharp. And shooting directly into the sunlight, it also seems to retain a lot of contrast and just quality of light. It really does a good job. Let me find one where I'm shooting more into the sunlight. I'm not even using a lens hood. Now, typically I don't shoot with a lens hood, and that creates just the right angle. Shooting directly into especially harsh sunlight, certain artifacts, like you can see here, this cool little rainbow streak, which I personally love. I love those kinds of organic, flawed qualities in my work, especially shooting with mirrorless cameras, where you can see the effects and impacts of that in real time and use that compositionally to your advantage. And again, shooting with mirrorless, since you see the real-time effects, if there is a problem because of the sunlight hitting the lens at a weird angle and I don't have a hood, I can literally just use my hand, the exact same way a hood works, to retain contrast or stop whatever flare or artifact I deem is problematic. Yeah, so just going through a lot more pictures, this lens performs exactly the way I would expect it to. There's nothing completely unique or interesting about the bokeh or the look that it makes, other than it's really smooth, really sharp. The autofocus is super fast, other than the fact that maybe it's my technique, which doesn't really make sense when it comes to depth of field and field of view ratios. I don't quite understand how this other photographer was getting the looks that they were getting. But here, I'll just pop in and edit a few of these. I didn't notice any, glaringly obvious color contrasts. Like, these files edit very clean, exactly the way that I would hope for them to edit. And they also match really well with my Nikon 1.4 Z mount lens, which eventually I'll have a little review about. But here's another example. This is just my second shooter, Nathan, at this wedding. You can kind of start to see some really interesting bokeh effects when you put the camera on the ground, but this is not anything unusual or otherworldly. He's very, very far back from the background, but yeah, this is exactly how I would expect this shot to look. Now, I don't want to venture too off topic, but I do want to show you an example. I don't know exactly how the bokeh was edited, but I don't know exactly how the bokeh was edited from this photographer, but here's an example of what I was hoping the bokeh would look like. Literally, adding lens blur at about 72 creates more in line with that insanely shallow depth of field, even though the subject isn't as far away from me as I would expect at this field of view. And yeah, it's not a huge night and day difference, but when all you see is that end result, it definitely has an impact, and it begs the question of what is happening in this shot. And yeah, this lens does not create this look because physics are real, and that's just the reality. Now, if you want to blend computational photography and glass and everything else, we can have a different conversation. But while we're on that topic, let's take a look at the profile corrections and see just how much is needed. Yeah, barely anything. And this is an approach to physical lens design that I really appreciate Nikon sticking to, is that their top tier high-end glass is not requiring much, if any, profile corrections to correct for distortion. Now, I've made a couple other videos about Canon lenses where it is 1000% required to have profile corrections turned on. And in doing that, you're losing a lot that I'm not even going to get into. But yeah, for those lenses to work, you have to have your profile corrections turned on, which is just an extra step, an extra processing load I never want to have to deal with $2,500, $3,000 lens. But yeah, at the end of the day, this is a lens that's totally worth keeping. If you shoot 85 often in your work as one of your main workhorse lenses, 1000% go buy this lens. But don't think it's gonna do anything completely detached from what an 85 1.2 has historically been able to do. Though it does resolve really well in terms of sharpness and shooting into the sunlight, you don't lose a lot of contrast. It's got really, really good lens coatings, and the size and weight is really, really agreeable. It's not creating some sort of crazy cool shallow depth of field that, personally I was looking for. So yeah, I'm gonna share these individual raw files along with an article in the link that's in the description of this video, of course, and that's gonna be over on my Patreon. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Always curious if other people have some pushback, and I just hope that it's reasonable pushback and coming from an informed, experienced place from users that actually have this lens and use it in a way that everybody would expect. So as always, thank you so much for your attention, and I'll be back soon. Bye, everybody.